15 June 1962 was a historic day for Cambodia and her people to always remember when the International Court of Justice issued its judgment stating that the Temple of Brahir and its vicinity are situated in the territory under the sovereignty of Cambodia. On 7 July 2008, under the proposal of Cambodia, the Temple of Brahir was inscribed by the World Heritage Committee as the World Heritage Site in Quebec, Canada. Immediately after the inscription of the Temple of Brahir on the World Heritage List, Thailand used all means to undermine the sovereignty of Cambodia over the temple and its vicinity, including dispatching 3 of its citizens to conduct meditation at the temple as a pretext to send its flag-clad troops to occupy the area within the vicinity of the temple and to launch offensive military aggression against Cambodia on various occasions between 2008 and 2011. Thai military actions had caused the complete destruction of a market located at the foothill of the Temple of Brahir, damaged the structures of the temple, caused countless injuries as well as the loss of human lives, and displaced hundreds of Cambodian villagers. Such acts of aggression by Thailand are considered as threats to peace and international security. In response, the royal government of Cambodia, in her capacity as a member state, filed a complaint with the ICJ in The Hague, requesting the court to interpret the 1962 court's judgment pursuant to Chapter 6 of the United Nations Charter.
This is what had happened in the previous Thai government led by opposite of the Democratic Party. Had the opposite government not launched heavy attacks on Cambodia, Cambodia would not have brought the case to the Hague-based International Court of Justice for interpretation of the court's judgment. Therefore, I am asking our people to be patient with the current legal battles at the International Court of Justice, in which we already won the case in 1962, under the leadership of the King Father Norodom Sihanouk. But due to the Thai violation of the court's judgment and the unilateral determination of the area, so-called 4.6 square kilometer, it is necessary for us to request the court for the interpretation. It is not a new lawsuit, but only how the court interprets the judgment.
Samdech Dacho Hun Sen, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Cambodia, had reiterated Cambodia's reason for its decision to submit the case to the ICJ at the inaugural ceremony of a Buddhist pagoda in Kampong Popel, Piriang District, Preven Province, just 4 days before His Excellency Hau Nam Hong, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, made an oral statement on 15 April 2013 before the ICJ in The Hague, the Netherlands. His Excellency Hau Nam Hong emphasized that Thailand seems to ignore its acts of aggression on Cambodia and wanted the court to reject the interpretation of the 1962 judgment at the request by Cambodia, as proven by Thailand's written observation dated 21 June 2012. In this regard, Cambodia had no option but to ask the court to clarify the meaning and the scope of the 1962 judgment. 214 days later, on 11 November 2013, the ICJ in The Hague announced the judgment of its interpretation of the 1962 decision with a 37 pages document written in English and French.
Although the court's judgment today did not satisfy 100% of our aspiration, we are pleased with this judgment as it provided what we want the most.
The judgment of 15 June 1962 decided that Cambodia had sovereignty over the whole territory of the promontory of Preah Vihear, as defined in paragraph 98 of the present judgment, and that, in consequence, Thailand was under an obligation to withdraw from that territory the Thai military or police forces or other guards or keepers that were stationed.
1. The court unanimously finds that it has jurisdiction under Article 60 of the statute to make a decision on the request for interpretation of the 1962 judgment presented by Cambodia, and that the request is admissible. 2. The court unanimously declares, by way of interpretation, that the judgment of 15 June 1962 decided that Cambodia has sovereignty over the whole territory of promontory of the Temple of Pravihir, as defined in paragraph 98 of the present judgment, and that, in consequence, Thailand was under an obligation to withdraw from the territory the Thai military or police forces or other guards or keepers that were stationed there. Paragraph 98 of the judgment identifies the limits of the promontory of the Pravihir mountain. In the north, which is a life and death issue, the limit of the promontory is the Annex 1 map line that is based on the Dong Rate map. So, the limit to the north is easy to see because the Annex 1 map line is used to identify the promontory of the Pravihir mountain. This implies that it is the boundary line. However, this cannot be stated directly as it would violate the principle of non-ultra petita. Thus, the court only states that to the north, the Annex 1 map line is used to set the limit of the promontory. Beyond that line is Thai territory. The court emphasized that the limit only comes to that line and not crossing it. To the east, the court recognized that the limit is where the Annex 1 map line intersects with the escarpment. We can see the plain and the mountain here. This part is 200 meters high. This one is 400 meters high, and this one is 500 meters high, and this one is 630 meters high. Therefore, the intersection between the Annex 1 map line and the escarpment is the limit to the east. So, the question is, which escarpment is the exact one? It can only be identified by the topographers. Soon, our topographers will begin their work. They will have to identify the exact points. For the limit in the east, it should not be a difficult issue, as the areas belong to Cambodia. It is not complicated, since the promontory of the mountain extended until the end of the escarpment, and beyond that it would be no longer called promontory. In the south, the issue is the same as in the east. It comes down to the escarpment that defines the limit of the promontory of Pravihir mountain. When it comes to the west and northwest, the issues become complicated. They said that the limit is where the land drops in slope. They said that the limit is where the land drops in a slope into a field next to where Ville and Tree is located. Why do we remember it is Ville and Tree? Because this is where we had clashes with Thai troops in 2011. And this is what Kau Sikha Giriswara, and the road, which links to the slopes of the mountain, runs in front of this pagoda and goes to the field that links all the way to Cambodian side. So, the limits to the west and the northwest are where the land drops in a slope less steep than the escarpment into a valley until the foothill of Phnom Trop mountain. Here is Phnom Trop, its highest point, and so on. Let's have a look. This is the foothill of Phnom Trop mountain, where the promontory of Pravihir mountain is located.
His Excellency Dr. Sok-an, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister in charge of the Office of the Council of Ministers, had explained the meaning and the scope of the judgment to approximately 1,000 civil servants from line ministries on 15 November 2013 and the Friendship Building. But it is regretful that some Thai public opinion have misinterpreted the ICJ judgment rendered on 11 November 2013 and further contradicted the truth and the genuine meaning of the judgment. To avoid misunderstanding amongst the national and international public opinions, experts, academics, and Cambodian lawyers recalled and explained the misguided Thai public opinion as follows. First, they claim that the ICJ in The Hague has no jurisdiction to interpret the 1962 judgment. Where is the evidence?
According to Article 60 of the Court's statute, the Court does have the jurisdiction and the obligation. Why? According to Article 60, it is clearly stated if either side or both parties did not agree with the judgment or there were different interpretations. If both parties or each of them had different interpretations of any of which files the complaint with the court then has the jurisdiction to interpret. The court recognized that the case had not yet been interpreted and it is not a new case brought by Cambodia. The court considered that Cambodia's request is admissible and therefore the court has the jurisdiction to interpret the judgment. Thus, the first question is whether we win or lose the case. This is up to the public opinion to judge whether we win or lose. When we first filed the complaint with the court, the Thai side immediately said that the court has no jurisdiction, but the court now declared that it has the jurisdiction. This is the first step. Going straight to the point, it meant they failed. I did not even mention win or lose, but I only said the term failure because the Thai delegation had earlier claimed that the court has no jurisdiction. But in fact, the court said that it has the jurisdiction. Second step. The question is, if the court was asked to interpret the judgment, how will the court do that? In the second step, the Thai stated that if the court was to interpret the judgment, the court will rule that the vicinity around the temple belongs to Thailand. They made such proclamation in both oral and written observations. Here are those documents sitting on my desk.
Second, the Hague-based court did not use the Annex 1 map.
Taking this opportunity, I would like to make it clear to our compatriots that the statements made by Thailand on the interpretation of the court's judgment in The Hague on 11th November 2013 was completely wrong. Why do I say that such statements are totally wrong? It is because their statements are in complete contrast to what the court clearly stated in its judgment both in 1962 and on 11th November 2013. In this respect, I would like to reiterate that the court, both the 1962 and the 2013 judgments, referred to Annex 1 map on which it was solely based. In 1962, the Annex 1 map was enlarged and used by the court. Based on the Annex 1 map line, the temple of Pravihir and its vicinity are situated to the south of the line. Here, I would like to emphasize that the Annex 1 map line had been used by the International Court of Justice for its reasoning to reaffirm the judgment on 11th November 2013, which is very important. Why do I say it is very important? Because the court's judgment on 11th November 2013 reaffirms its 1962 judgment. How does it reaffirm? It reaffirms on the legal basis. The watershed line raised by Thailand since 1962 was rejected by the court. The court made its judgment in respect to the non ultra petita principle. It means that the court's judgment on 11 November 2013 could not be interpreted beyond the 1962 judgment. In general, in the court's proceedings, each party to a dispute can select an ad hoc judge who will take part in making judgment along with the panel of judges. Speaking of the ad hoc judge, Mr. Cott was chosen by Thailand. Naturally, selected judge by the party to the dispute is always in favor of the party he or she represents. Mr. Kot, however, turned out to be the other way around. He criticized Thailand by stating that Thailand confused the meaning, and in French, a contresens, of the 1962 judgment. I hardly ever see an ad hoc judge criticizing the party he or she represents. For Cambodia, Mr. Guillaume was chosen, and he also issued a statement saying that he is pleased with the judgment at the Cambodia's request, which is in favor of Cambodia the most.
Third, Thai Foreign Minister Surapong Towichak said immediately following the announcement of the judgment that Cambodia and Thailand will open the discussion to create a joint development zone by referring to paragraph 106 of the judgment. However, the real meaning of paragraph 106 is that
with all these issues related to paragraph 106, we can say that Thailand is manipulating the terms stated in the judgment on 11th November 2013 to mislead the public that Thailand could either cooperate or joint manage the Cambodian territory at the area of the Temple of Pravihir. But these claims are fabrications, given that the meaning, both in French and English text of the court's judgment stated that the parties to the dispute have to respect the Hague-based court ruling. That is to say, Thailand has to respect the judgment. Firstly, Thailand shall not obstruct Cambodia's free access to the Temple of Pravihir. Secondly, Thailand is under an obligation not to take any deliberate measure which might damage directly or indirectly such heritage. Thirdly, Cambodia and Thailand must cooperate between themselves and the international community who love cultural property and are members of the World Heritage Committee for the protection, restoration, preservation and development of the Temple of Pravihir and the temple area as World Heritage in the future.
In Phnom Penh, while Cambodian people applauded the court's judgment and are proud of their government's effort, the opposition party neither contribute to the task nor joined the people to welcome such achievement, but instead, CNRP issued a statement dated 11 November 2013 calling the government to protect Cambodia's territory on the western and eastern borders. Concerning the border issues between Cambodia and her neighbors, His Excellency Dr. Sok-an clarified as follows.
The court has to abide by the principle of non-ultra petita, meaning that the court does not go beyond the request. As for Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos and Thailand, all must abide by the principle of the public international law called util possidetis juris, a Greek term that is kept in its original form in international law. It means that each country should recognize the legacy left for us, such as the issue of border. For border issue, if it was revoked, there would be hostility that would lead to wars and serious clashes between countries, especially with the neighboring country. And thus, not only Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos and Thailand, most countries in the world which recognize the principle called util possidetis juris, or in French called principe de l'intangibilité de la frontière, have to accept the legacies left to them. France had negotiated with Thailand and they had concluded the 1904 convention and produced the 1907 maps. So, we have now accepted these maps and used them until today. But the problem was that the scale was too small, like the map of 1/200,000. We have to enlarge the scale of the map. We have to enlarge scale and plant more border poles. So what we have to do is to conduct the actual delimitation work on the ground by applying what we have on the map. Both Cambodia and Thailand must go through rounds of negotiations and agree on the recognition of the enlarged map before we plant the border poles. The tiny scale map was transposed to the large scale map so that the real work can be implemented by planting big border poles. We do the same with Vietnam. Though the process goes faster compared to Thailand, we implemented the maps that were published in 1930s, 1940s and 1950 and produced by the Service Géographique de l'Indochine, an agency created by France. The agency was dissolved after our independence and their work were given back to each respective country. Before the independence, Cambodia, Vietnam and Laos only had a single agency producing the map, and thus, until today, we continue to recognize that map, and so does Vietnam. We now have the Survey and Demarcation of Land Boundary Commission working on all boundary issues, and the same principle is applied to how we deal with Thailand, how we deal with Vietnam, and how we deal with Laos. We abide by the principle of util possidetis juris. It is not like we use the principle discriminately against Thailand, Vietnam and Laos. Dealing with Vietnam goes even faster than dealing with Thailand, and for Laos we have planted more than 80% of the border poles. With Vietnam, the process of border demarcation is underway, but we postponed the work of border demarcations in some areas due to our general election. Now that the election is over, we are resuming the work to plant the small, medium and big border poles. When two neighboring countries have a well-defined map that is jointly recognized by the parties and major international organizations, and the border poles planted on actual land, then the boundary disputes can ultimately be put to an end. In the case of Europe, during the period of World War I and World War II, there was fierce fighting resulted from the boundary disputes. However, after their rounds of negotiation, they were able to reach agreements through treaties and conventions that were followed by border demarcation, some of which were constructed with concrete walls. Since they have much more money than we do, they installed the border poles wherever disputes arose. As we have seen concrete evidences when driving all the way from France to Switzerland and to Belgium, we saw some areas where the boundary walls installed like house fences. And what those walls are all about? Those are boundary walls. If boundary walls were placed in such a way, disputes would no longer persist. The boundary walls are so tight, but in our case, we do not have the boundary poles in place, and they exist only on the map. They do not exist on land. Hence, there is dispute, since there is no concrete evidence sitting on the ground. In this respect, the committee does wish to resolve the issues in such a manner. We do want the complete border demarcations with Vietnam, Laos and Thailand. This would be a new era. There would be no border disputes because the big concrete border poles could not be removed, and wherever there was potential conflict, the concrete border walls would be built right there. There would be then no more conflicts. We can see the experiences in the evolution of history, what other countries have gone through before us. Once there are clear boundary lines and well-defined maps, there are no need for passports and borders because the legal basis is already very clear. Let's have a look at Schengen. In Europe, a visa issued by one country can be used to travel to the rest in the region. There are some people working in Germany, but they reside in France because their houses are there. Some others work in France, but their houses are in Germany. It is subjected to the types of the tax system. They reside in those areas that require them to pay less taxes, and they cross borders to come to work daily. However, such ease and facilitation could only be possible unless there is a clear foundation, well-defined maps, border poles, and no border controversial issues. The restrictions would be gradually relaxed to facilitate cross-border interaction between people to people, goods and services, and means of transportation. As with us and ASEAN, it is also gradually introduced. However, the problem is that the demarcations with Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam have yet completed. If the demarcation was completed, everything would be resolved. And this is the major task that is taken seriously by the royal government under the leadership of Samdech Dacho Hun Sen, who himself as well as the royal government are committed to accomplish. The commitment is to have clear boundary lines on maps, in treaties and conventions, as well as on land. This is our ultimate goal. So the question that we only preoccupy with the West and not the East is just people making noise, which is absolutely wrong.
While there are some criticisms in Phnom Penh and misleading by the certain Thai groups in Bangkok, the truth remains unchanged. Samdech Techo Hun Sen, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Cambodia, announced that Cambodia, as a member state of the United Nations, respects and implements the ICJ's judgment on 11th November 2013.
I would like to emphasize that, on the legal principle, parties to any dispute are bound to fully and effectively implement any national or international court's judgments and its meaning. Therefore, in the case concerning the Temple of Preah, the ICJ in The Hague rendered its judgment in 1962, and the court rendered its judgment for the interpretation of the 1962 judgment on its meaning and scope on 11 November 2013. The parties to the dispute, Cambodia and Thailand, are bound to fully implement the court's judgment and its meaning. In this regard, both parties cannot disagree and must observe the court's judgment. Article 94 of the UN's Charter clearly stipulates in paragraph 1 that all parties to the dispute are bound to implement the court's judgment and its meaning. Further, Article 94, paragraph 2 stipulates that if any party does not honor the court's judgment and indeed the other party in dispute could file the complaint with the United Nations Security Council. Such stipulations are aimed at guaranteeing the binding force respected by all member states of the United Nations to ensuring peace in the world. In addition to the obligation of members under the scope of the UN Charter and also with the terms of bilateral framework of both governments, Cambodia and Thailand have been implementing the Phase 2 to avoid history from repeating itself.
On
28 October 2013 in Poipet, His Excellency Deputy Prime Minister Hao Nam Hong met with Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, His Excellency Surapong Tawichak Chaikul, and both parties agreed to implement the court's judgment through all peaceful means and to refrain from any use of force. Then, what should we do with the Phase 2? After the court's decision, we have to cooperatively work hand in hand on the ground with Thailand in order to identify the boundary line of the territory belonging to Cambodia and territory belonging to Thailand. This requires a joint effort, and that either party cannot impose a unilateral solution. We both need to work together as clearly stated in paragraph 99 of the 11 November 2013 judgment. Now, the court has already decided. The court has had enough with the case. In 1962, immediately after the court's judgment, Thailand had unilaterally determined a boundary line, which was called July 1962 Thai Council of Ministers Line. Thereafter, Thailand dispatched its troops to set up barbed wire fences, but not this time around. Paragraph 99 of the reasoning of the 11 November 2013 judgment clearly states that the International Court of Justice does not permit any party to impose any deliberate unilateral measure. What does it mean? It means that the court has had enough. In 1962, following the judgment, Thailand did impose a unilateral solution. Now, the court ordered both parties not to take any unilateral solution. In paragraph 105, the court states that once a dispute regarding territorial sovereignty has been resolved and uncertainty removed, each party must fulfill in good faith the obligation which all states have to respect the territorial integrity of all other states. This means that after the court rendered its judgment, we have to follow its meaning in good faith without having any hidden agenda of territorial ambition, because there are no more doubts. Therefore, we shall honestly implement the judgment in good faith. The court uses the term good faith. Seriously, I have never heard any court ordered the parties to the dispute to implement the judgment in good faith. Why did the court order to do so? Because the court is concerned that one of the parties concerned may have dirty tricks in their bag.
So far, the royal government of Cambodia has thoroughly considered the border matter and planned to convert the former disputed area into a development zone.
The royal government of Cambodia has always held a firm position, committing to establish a well-defined boundary line and converting the border areas of Cambodia with the neighboring countries into a border areas of peace, friendship, cooperation, and development. In this spirit, Her Excellency Yingluck Shinawatra, Prime Minister and Minister of National Defense of the Kingdom of Thailand, and I are sharing the same position, that whatever the outcome of the 11 November 2013 court judgment would be, both our countries shall respect its judgment and commit to maintain peace and stability along the border at all cost. In this context, I would like to once again appeal to all armed forces that are on duty to protect the border to continue to remain calm, to exercise their utmost restraint, and to avoid any provocative acts that could lead to unintentional tension or clashes. I would also like to appeal to venerable Buddhist monks and compatriots to remain calm and to contribute to maintaining security and public order in the country, as well as to further safeguarding and enhancing the spirit of friendly neighborliness, solidarity, friendship, harmony, and closer cooperation between the nations and peoples of Cambodia and Thailand for the immediate and long-term interests of our two countries.
The ICJ's interpretation over the meaning and the scope of its 1962 judgment concerning the Temple of Pravihir and its vicinity enabled the next Khmer generations to safeguard their ancestral heritage dated back over 1,000 years ago.
We see that the Temple of Pravihir is one of the temples that have long great historical records. Starting from the building of the temple in the early 11th century to the present, this temple is more than 1,000 years old. According to the stone inscription on the Temple of Pravihir, there were two kings who constructed the temple, namely Prabhat Soryavaraman I in early 11th century and completed by Prabhat Soryavaraman II in 12th century. They were the Khmer kings, and I would like to further emphasize that neither Siam nor Thailand existed at that time. Until 300 or 400 years later, at 13th and 14th centuries, there was the presence of Thais on Cambodian territory. If we look back to the past, we could see that our Cambodian territory was a huge empire extending its borders with China to the north, Burma to the west, Malayu to the south, and Pacific Ocean to the east. Hence, it was a vast territory. I would also like to further emphasize that the Temple of Pravihir reflected the symbol of national unity and solidarity. It was where political ideals and ideologies were incorporated by the Khmer kings as the Khmer strength based on national unity and solidarity. As a Khmer son, and in the name of friends of the Temple of Pravihir, we would like to make the following statements. First, we would like to express our profound thanks to the ICJ in The Hague for providing Cambodia the truthfulness and justice in preserving the Temple of Pravihir as Khmer heritage, the heritage of humanity. Second, the truthfulness and justice enable Cambodians and all humanity to have the time and the opportunity to restore and safeguard this humanity's heritage for long lasting. Third, this judgment helps to prevent the Temple of Pravihir from further destructions. Therefore, we would like to appeal to the international community and the United Nations institution in charge of the work related to the Temple of Pravihir, a Khmer heritage as well as a heritage of humanity, seeking ways to save, protect, restore and timely safeguard the Temple of Pravihir. From my own research on the site, it showed that the Temple of Pravihir is under serious conditions of dilapidation, which cause us great concern because in some areas, especially in the Garupa 3, were seriously damaged by the Thai bullets and shrapnel. The damaged sandstones of the ruins fall off the walls and break into sandy pieces. If we leave it as it is, the wall of Garupa 3 may collapse and break into pieces and dissolving into sand. We, therefore, would like to call for all the people around the world, UNESCO and the World Heritage Committee to take urgent actions for the protection of the Temple of Pravihir.
The Temple of Pravihir is currently in critical condition, and UNESCO has agreed to send its expert to commence the restoration work on the temple in February 2014. In this respect, the ancestral heritage of more than 1,000 years old, the Temple of Pravihir has been safeguarded by the royal government of Cambodia under the leadership of Samdech Dacho Hun Sen, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Cambodia. This world heritage has been preserved for the next generations.